15. Most hated black pastors. Behind the pulpit, some pastors preached about faith, sacrifice, and morality, but behind closed doors, their actions told a very different story. From secret affairs and financial fraud to outrageous public scandals that left entire congregations betrayed, these so-called men of God became some of the most hated pastors in America. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It shook communities, destroyed churches, and shattered trust in spiritual leadership. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the pastors who turned praise into controversy. Stay tuned, because you won't believe who made this list. Subscribe now to Legends of Black Excellence. Bishop Eddie Long. Bishop Eddie Long once stood as one of the most powerful and influential pastors in America. As senior pastor of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Lithonia, Georgia, he transformed a modest congregation into a megachurch with more than 25,000 members at its peak. His sermons were broadcast nationwide, his books sold thousands of copies, and his church became a hub for celebrities, politicians, and business leaders. Long's rise seemed unstoppable, and for years he embodied the image of success in the black church community. But behind the polished image and luxury lifestyle, complete with expensive cars and tailored suits, dark questions began to surface. In 2007, the U.S. Senate launched an investigation into several high-profile televangelists, including Long, to determine whether donations were being used for personal enrichment. This scrutiny placed him directly under a spotlight that would only intensify in the years ahead. The breaking point came in 2010 when 4 young men who had been members of his congregation filed lawsuits against him. They alleged that Long had used his position of authority to coerce them into sexual relationships while they were still teenagers. These accusations shocked the public especially because Long had built his reputation on preaching conservative values, family stability, and strict morality. The contrast between his message and the allegations created a wave of outrage both inside and outside the church. Long denied all accusations and declared his innocence from the pulpit, telling his congregation that he was David fighting Goliath. Yet in 2011, instead of defending himself in court, he quietly reached a settlement with the young men. Though the terms remained confidential, reports suggested the payout reached into the millions. For many, settling rather than facing trial was seen as an admission of guilt, and his reputation never recovered. Membership at New Birth Missionary Baptist Church declined sharply, and Long's once untouchable influence evaporated. Despite efforts to restore his image, the damage was irreversible. In 2016, he revealed he was battling an aggressive form of cancer, and on January 15, 2017, he passed away at just 63 years old. Even in death, the controversies overshadowed his legacy, leaving his congregation and the wider faith community divided over how to remember him. Bishop Eddie Long's story remains a cautionary tale, a man who once held the loyalty of tens of thousands, but whose personal actions dismantled a legacy built over decades. Creflo Dollar. Creflo Augustus Dollar, the founder of World Changers Church International in College Park, Georgia, built one of the most recognizable empires in modern Christianity. With over 30,000 members and a television ministry reaching millions, Dollar became synonymous with the prosperity gospel, a doctrine teaching that faith, positive confession, and generous giving would result in divine blessings of health and wealth. To many, he embodied the promise of prosperity, living in multi-million-dollar homes, driving luxury vehicles, and traveling the world. Yet his name became one of the most controversial in the black church. The turning point came in 2015 when Dollar publicly asked his congregation and online followers to help him purchase a $65 million Gulfstream G650 private jet. He framed the request as a ministry necessity, explaining that the aircraft would allow him to spread the gospel globally without the hassle of commercial flights. For critics, it was a symbol of excess. Why should a pastor funded by donations from hardworking believers seek one of the most expensive jets on earth? The backlash was immediate. News outlets across the U.S. highlighted the story while social media erupted with disbelief. Commentators noted that the amount he requested could feed thousands of families or fund schools and hospitals. Dollar defended himself, saying that God's people deserve the best, and claimed his critics misunderstood the prosperity message. But the jet campaign quickly became a meme for greed in the pulpit, casting a long shadow over his ministry. Here's a thought for you. Do you think faith leaders are entitled to live lavishly if their followers willingly support them, or should they model modesty to maintain trust? Controversy was not new to Creflo Dollar. In 2012, he was arrested for allegedly assaulting his 15-year-old daughter during an argument at home. Though the charges were later dropped after he completed an anger management program, the incident tarnished his reputation further, feeding into the public perception that he was out of touch with his own teachings on family values. Despite these scandals, Dollar has retained a loyal following. His sermons continue to be broadcast worldwide, and he remains unapologetic about preaching prosperity. For some, he represents hope and empowerment, proving that believers can rise above poverty. For others, he epitomizes the commercialization of faith, where pastors live like celebrities while congregants struggle to make ends meet. Creflo Dollar's name has become shorthand for the dangers of mixing wealth and religion. His story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the line between inspiration and exploitation, and whether the pursuit of prosperity can ever truly align with the humility of the gospel. Henry J. Lyons once held one of the most prestigious positions in black religious life, president of the National Baptist Convention USA, an organization representing millions of members and thousands of churches. Charismatic, eloquent, and politically connected, Lyons was seen as a voice of authority during the 1990s, capable of shaping the future of the African American church. For many, he embodied dignity and leadership at the highest level of faith. But behind the pulpit, Lyons was orchestrating one of the most shocking financial scandals in the history of black religious institutions. Investigations revealed that between the mid-1990s and 1999, Lyons had stolen more than $4 million from church-related funds. Instead of using the money for ministry, he spent lavishly on luxury cars, expensive jewelry, and multiple homes. He even financed a mansion for a woman who was not his wife, further deepening the scandal when the media discovered the affair. The scheme collapsed when suspicious financial dealings came under scrutiny. In 1999, Lyons was convicted of fraud, racketeering, and grand theft, receiving a 5.5-year prison sentence. His fall from grace was devastating not only for him personally, but for the millions of church members who had trusted him as their representative. After serving his sentence, Lyons attempted to return to ministry, claiming repentance and a renewed commitment to serving God. Some communities welcomed him back, citing the Christian values of forgiveness and redemption. However, the shadow of his past never disappeared. In 2017, he was forced out of leadership once again amid accusations of financial mismanagement. History, it seemed, was repeating itself. Lyons passed away in 2019 at the age of 77, leaving behind a deeply divided legacy. Supporters remembered his oratory skills, his leadership during the civil rights era, and his ability to inspire. Critics pointed to the greed and deception that destroyed trust in one of the largest Baptist organizations in America. Henry Lyons' story stands as a sobering warning: power without accountability can corrupt even the most celebrated leaders. His rise and fall reveal just how fragile faith in institutions can become when leaders place personal desires above sacred responsibility. Reverend Jeremiah Wright. For over 2 decades, Reverend Jeremiah Wright led Trinity United Church of Christ on the south side of Chicago, building it into one of the most socially active black churches in America. His congregation of more than 6,000 members admired his fiery sermons on racial justice, community empowerment, and America's responsibility to the poor. Among those who worshiped under him was a rising young politician named Barack Obama, who considered Wright a mentor and even borrowed the title of his book, The Audacity of Hope, from one of Wright's sermons. For years, Wright was respected in Chicago as a pastor who challenged systems of inequality while uplifting his community. But in 2008, As Obama launched his campaign for the presidency, archived video clips of Wright's most controversial sermons surfaced, and the impact was explosive. In one clip, Wright shouted, "Goddamn America," as he denounced U.S. foreign policy and systemic racism. In another, he compared American actions abroad to terrorism. These soundbites, pulled out of longer sermons, spread like wildfire on television and across the internet. Obama's opponents seized on Wright's words, using them to question the future president's patriotism. After all, if Obama had spent 20 years under Wright's leadership, critics argued, perhaps he secretly agreed with such rhetoric. The controversy threatened to derail his campaign before it truly gained momentum. Under mounting pressure, Obama delivered a landmark speech in Philadelphia on race, where he acknowledged Wright's contributions to his life, but condemned the inflammatory remarks as divisive and destructive. Shortly after, Obama cut ties with the church entirely, a painful decision that marked the end of a spiritual and personal chapter. For Wright, the fallout was devastating. Though he insisted his words were taken out of context and argued he was speaking hard truths about America's failings, the damage was done. To his supporters, he remained a courageous truth-teller, unafraid of confronting injustice. To critics, he became a symbol of anti-American anger and extremism. Reverend Jeremiah Wright's legacy is complex. He was a pastor who empowered thousands to embrace their identity with pride. Yet his fiery words ignited one of the most controversial political storms in modern history. His story is a reminder that in an age of sound bites and viral clips, a single sermon can reshape the course of national politics. Reverend Al Sharpton. Reverend Al Sharpton has spent decades in the public eye, straddling the line between activism politics and ministry. Born in Brooklyn, New York in 1954, Sharpton rose to prominence as a fiery preacher and outspoken civil rights activist. By the 1980s, he was already a fixture in protests against racial injustice, police brutality, and economic inequality. His ability to mobilize crowds and grab media attention made him both admired and controversial. But one of the earliest and most damaging episodes of his career came in 1987 with the case of Tawana Brawley, a 15-year-old African-American girl who claimed she had been kidnapped, assaulted, and left covered in feces with racial slurs written on her body. The horrifying allegations drew national outrage, and Sharpton stepped in as Brawley's spokesman. He held press conferences, led rallies, and directly accused several white men, including prosecutor Stephen Pagonis, of participating in the attack. As the months passed, investigators found inconsistencies in Brawley's story. Eventually, a grand jury concluded in 1988 that the entire account had been fabricated. Evidence suggested Brawley invented the story to avoid punishment from her stepfather. The revelation was devastating. An innocent man's reputation had been destroyed, and Sharpton, who had amplified the false claims, was held legally responsible. In 1998, he was ordered to pay $65,000 in damages to Pagonis for defamation, though Sharpton's supporters ultimately helped cover the judgment. Despite the scandal, Sharpton did not fade away. Instead, he rebuilt his career by doubling down on activism. He founded the National Action Network (NAN) in 1991, which became a major civil rights organization focused on police reform, voter rights, and economic empowerment. Over time, he reinvented himself from street protester to political insider, advising presidents from Bill Clinton to Barack Obama, and later hosting his own show on MSNBC. Yet critics argue that Sharpton never fully took responsibility for the Brawley case. They claim his refusal to apologize outright reflects a tendency to prioritize publicity over accountability. His flamboyant style, sharp tongue, and frequent media appearances have continued to divide public opinion. To some, he remains a hero who speaks uncomfortable truths. To others, he is a self-promoter whose past mistakes cannot be ignored. Reverend Al Sharpton's life captures the dual nature of leadership, the ability to inspire progress, but also the danger of overstepping in pursuit of justice. His legacy will forever carry the weight of the Tawana Brawley scandal alongside his undeniable impact on civil rights. Pastor Michael Todd. Pastor Michael Todd emerged as one of the most dynamic young preachers of his generation. As the lead pastor of Transformation Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, he gained national attention for his energetic preaching style, modern approach to ministry, and ability to connect with younger audiences. His sermons, often streamed online regularly, attracted millions of views, positioning him as a new face of the digital-era church. With his fresh style, casual attire, and focus on creativity, Todd represented a break from traditional pulpit delivery, showing that church could be exciting, engaging, and relevant to modern life. But in January 2022, Todd discovered the risks of blending theatrics with sacred messages. During a sermon illustration meant to symbolize how God's vision can be messy before becoming clear, Todd did something shocking. He spat into his hand and smeared the saliva onto the face of a volunteer, his own brother. The audience gasped in disbelief. Some nervously laughed, while others sat in stunned silence. Unfortunately for Todd, the entire act was filmed and almost instantly went viral across TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Within hours, millions had seen the clip. Outrage poured in as people condemned the act as disgusting, unhygienic, and deeply inappropriate, especially given that it occurred in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, when public sensitivity to germs and safety was at its peak. What Todd intended as a powerful metaphor for transformation was widely ridiculed as an extreme lapse in judgment. The backlash forced Todd into damage control. Just days later, he released a public apology video admitting that the illustration had crossed the line and was disgusting. He clarified that while he always sought to be creative in delivering the gospel, he had missed the mark this time and would learn from the mistake. The apology softened some criticism, but the incident permanently attached his name to one of the most infamous viral moments in recent church history. Despite the controversy, Transformation Church has continued to grow under Todd's leadership. His willingness to experiment, though sometimes reckless, has kept him in the spotlight and sustained his influence among young Christians seeking unconventional ministry. Still, the Spit Sermon remains a cautionary tale about the thin line between creativity and shock value in the pulpit. Pastor Michael Todd's story proves that in the age of social media, one misguided moment can overshadow years of ministry, leaving a lasting imprint on both reputation and legacy. Louis Farrakhan. Louis Farrakhan has long been one of the most polarizing religious leaders in America. Born in 1933, he rose through the ranks of the Nation of Islam after being recruited by Malcolm X in the 1950s. By the mid-1970s, he had become the group's most visible figure, eventually serving as its leader for more than 4 decades. Under his watch, the NOI grew into a movement that promoted Black pride, economic self-reliance, and strong moral discipline. His fiery speeches attracted massive crowds and earned him a devoted following, particularly among African Americans who felt marginalized by mainstream society. But with influence came notoriety. Farrakhan's speeches, while energizing to his supporters, often contained rhetoric that critics condemned as racist, anti-Semitic, and homophobic. Over the years, he referred to Jewish people as termites, suggested they controlled banks and the media, and accused them of orchestrating social and political oppression. Civil rights groups like the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center have repeatedly classified his words as hate speech. These remarks overshadowed his calls for empowerment and placed him at the center of countless controversies. In 1995, Farrakhan organized the Million Man March in Washington, D.C., which drew hundreds of thousands of Black men in a historic display of unity and discipline. While the event remains one of the largest demonstrations in American history, even it was marred by debates about Farrakhan's divisive reputation. Supporters saw him as a visionary, capable of mobilizing a generation. Critics warned that his hateful language could inspire division and violence. By the 2010s, Farrakhan's presence extended online, where clips of his speeches circulated widely. Yet in 2019, Facebook and Instagram banned him permanently, citing violations of their policies against dangerous individuals and organizations. Despite being deplatformed, his influence persisted through grassroots networks and loyal followers who continued to spread his message. Today, Farrakhan remains both revered and reviled. To his supporters, he is a fearless truth-teller who speaks to the struggles of the Black community. To his detractors, he is a preacher of hate whose inflammatory words undermine his calls for justice. His life and career encapsulate the tension between empowerment and extremism, making him one of the most hated yet enduring figures in modern religious and political history. Louis Farrakhan's story reminds us that words have power to inspire, but also to wound, divide, and define how history remembers a leader. Pastor Jamal Harrison Bryant. Pastor Jamal Harrison Bryant has long been recognized as one of the most charismatic voices in the modern Black church. Born in 1971 in Baltimore, Maryland, Bryant is the son of Bishop John Richard Bryant, a well-respected leader in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. With an Ivy League education from Morehouse College and Duke University, followed by doctoral studies at the Graduate Theological Foundation, he seemed destined for leadership. By the early 2000s, Bryant was already a rising star known for his fiery sermons, political activism, and ability to connect biblical messages to issues of racial justice, poverty, and inequality. In 2000, Bryant founded Empowerment Temple AME Church in Baltimore, which quickly grew to thousands of members, making it one of the fastest-growing congregations in the region. His mix of social commentary and gospel preaching made him a sought-after figure on television and in national conversations about justice. Later, he would go on to lead New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Georgia, a megachurch once led by the late Bishop Eddie Long. But Bryant's career has been marked by scandals that often overshadow his achievements. In 2008, he admitted to an extramarital affair while serving at Empowerment Temple, leading to the dissolution of his marriage. Critics accused him of hypocrisy, especially since he often preached about family values and morality. While some congregants left, others stayed, citing his transparency and willingness to admit mistakes. Then in 2022, Bryant made headlines again, this time not for infidelity, but for a bizarre suggestion. In an interview, he proposed that churches should consider growing marijuana on their property as a way to attract young men and create jobs. He claimed the move could build connections with younger generations, often absent from church life. While some saw it as creative thinking, most religious leaders condemned the idea as inappropriate, especially given the struggles many communities face with substance abuse. The comment sparked online backlash, turning Bryant into a viral talking point. Despite controversies, Bryant continues to maintain a large following. His advocacy on issues like racial injustice and voter suppression has kept him relevant in both religious and political circles. He has shown resilience, bouncing back from scandals that might have ended other careers. Jamal Harrison Bryant's story is one of contrasts, a preacher who speaks passionately about justice, yet repeatedly finds himself entangled in personal and professional storms. His journey highlights how charisma can build influence but also invite constant scrutiny. Bishop Noel Jones. Bishop Noel Jones, born in 1950 in Jamaica, is the senior pastor of the City of Refuge Church in Gardena, California. Known for his booming voice and intellectual preaching, he built a reputation as a respected theologian and one of the most popular pastors on the West Coast. With tens of thousands of members, his ministry touched lives across the globe, and he became a spiritual advisor to celebrities and everyday worshipers alike. But in 2013, Jones stepped into the national spotlight in a way few pastors dared by joining the cast of the Oxygen reality show Preachers of LA. The series promised to give viewers a behind-the-scenes look at the lives of prominent pastors. What audiences got instead was an unfiltered glimpse into their wealth mansions, designer suits, luxury cars, and lifestyles that mirrored Hollywood celebrities more than humble shepherds. For Jones, the show exposed contradictions. He drove expensive vehicles, lived in a beautiful estate, and openly flaunted his success. While he defended his lifestyle as a reflection of God's blessings, critics accused him and his fellow castmates of turning the pulpit into a stage for materialism. Members of the Christian community argued that the show trivialized faith-painting pastors as entertainers obsessed with status. Here's a question for you. Do you believe spiritual leaders can live extravagantly without losing credibility, or should humility always define the role of a pastor? Though Jones has continued to lead his church, the controversy surrounding his wealth and reality. TV fame remains a blemish on his ministry. His story highlights the tension between prosperity and modesty in modern churches and how easily influence can shift into spectacle. Dietrich Haddon. Dietrich Haddon was not only a pastor, but also a celebrated gospel recording artist, winning awards for hits like Well Done and He's Able. Born in 1973 in Detroit, Michigan, he grew up steeped in church culture and became known for blending contemporary sounds with traditional gospel. His charisma and talent propelled him to the national stage, making him a role model for many young believers. But when he too joined Preachers of LA, his personal life took center stage in ways that shocked many. At the time, Haddon was living with his fiancée Dominique McTire, and the two had a daughter together, despite his long-standing preaching about traditional Christian values, such as abstinence before marriage and the sanctity of family. The hypocrisy was glaring. The situation grew more complicated when his ex-wife Demita publicly accused him of bending the truth about their divorce and painting himself as a victim. Suddenly, the gospel singer who had inspired thousands with uplifting music was being scrutinized for failing to live up to the very standards he taught from the pulpit. Here's something to consider. Should pastors who admit their flaws be commended for honesty, or should they step aside when their actions contradict their own teachings? Haddon defended himself by claiming he was being transparent and showing that pastors were human too. Yet critics argued that true accountability would have meant aligning his actions with his words. While his music career continues, his credibility as a spiritual leader has been permanently damaged. Dietrich Haddon's story reflects the deep challenges of balancing fame, ministry, and personal choices in the spotlight. His fall from grace illustrates how easily a public platform can amplify both inspiration and failure. Pastor John Gray. Pastor John Gray was once seen as the future of the megachurch movement. A former associate pastor under Joel Osteen at Lakewood Church in Houston, Gray gained national attention for his passionate preaching and ability to connect with diverse audiences. By the time he launched Relentless Church in Greenville, South Carolina, he had already become a household name in Christian media. His sermons mixed humor, charisma, and raw emotion, drawing thousands to his congregation and millions through television and social media. Yet Gray's ministry became synonymous with excess. He bought a $1.8 million home funded through church-related channels, insisting it was necessary for his work. In 2018, he famously purchased a $200,000 Lamborghini Urus SUV for his wife Aventure as an anniversary gift. While Gray defended the gift by claiming pastors shouldn't have to drive broken-down cars, critics slammed the purchase as a blatant example of prosperity preaching gone wrong. But it wasn't just materialism that damaged Gray's reputation. Allegations of infidelity began to surface, with multiple women claiming inappropriate communication or encounters with the pastor. In 2019 and again in 2020, Gray publicly admitted to emotional affairs and stood before his congregation to ask forgiveness while his wife chose to remain by his side. The repeated scandals painted a picture of a leader unable to practice the fidelity and discipline he preached. Despite the controversies, Gray's influence endures, though diminished. His church continues to operate, and he still draws attention for his sermons. Yet the perception of hypocrisy remains, leaving many to wonder whether his legacy will be defined by his words of hope or his personal failings. Lamer Whitehead. Bishop Lamer Miller. Whitehead, often called the Bling Bishop, became infamous, not for his sermons but for his extravagant lifestyle and criminal schemes. As pastor of Leaders of Tomorrow International Churches in Brooklyn, New York, he quickly stood out by wearing designer suits, flashy jewelry, and driving luxury cars more associated with rap stars than men of God. His unapologetic display of wealth earned him both fame and ridicule. In July 2022, Whitehead made headlines after being robbed at gunpoint during a live-streamed Sunday service. Masked men stole an estimated $1 million in jewelry directly from him and his wife in front of his congregation. The shocking crime raised questions. Why was a pastor wearing so much jewelry in the pulpit in the first place? The scrutiny only deepened when federal investigators exposed Whitehead's fraudulent activities. He was convicted in 2023 on charges including wire fraud, attempted extortion, and lying to the FBI. Prosecutors revealed he had scammed parishioners out of their life savings, including one elderly woman who trusted him with her retirement funds. Instead of investing, he used the money for luxury goods and personal expenses. The self-proclaimed man of God was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. Whitehead's downfall cemented his reputation as one of the most hated figures in modern black ministry. His story demonstrates how unchecked greed and arrogance can turn the pulpit into a platform for self-enrichment rather than spiritual guidance. James David Manning. Reverend James David Manning, leader of the ATLAH World Missionary Church in Harlem, New York, is one of the most controversial religious figures in America. Once a small-time preacher with a modest following, Manning became infamous not for spreading love or compassion, but for his incendiary sermons that frequently targeted the LGBTQ+ community, political leaders, and even fellow Christians. His rhetoric has made him a lightning rod for criticism, placing him in the category of most hated pastors. Manning's pulpit became a stage for some of the most shocking statements in modern church history. He has openly declared that gay people should be stoned to death, aligning his teachings with an extreme and literal interpretation of Old Testament law. His sermons often went viral not because of inspiration, but because of their cruelty. In one bizarre claim, Manning accused Starbucks of allowing gay employees to contaminate coffee with bodily fluids, turning the coffee giant into a target of one of his conspiracy theories. These remarks spread widely online, often becoming the subject of mockery memes and outrage. Civil rights groups, including the Southern Poverty Law Center, have labeled Manning's teachings as hate speech, arguing that his words could incite real violence. Even conservative pastors who disagreed with LGBTQ+ rights distanced themselves from his extreme rhetoric, leaving Manning isolated within the larger religious community. Manning's controversies didn't stop with LGBTQ+ issues. He has promoted conspiracy theories about political figures, including claims that President Barack Obama was not truly American and that his presidency was part of a grand deception. These extreme positions only further damaged Manning's credibility, pushing him to the fringes of both religious and political discourse. His church, ATLAH, has also faced financial difficulties with reports of foreclosure battles and dwindling membership. Yet Manning has refused to back down, continuing to preach fiery sermons that appeal to a small but loyal base of followers who see him as a prophet, unafraid to speak the truth. For the broader public, however, Manning's name is synonymous with hatred and intolerance. Instead of building bridges, his ministry has torn them down, leaving a legacy defined more by division than faith. His story illustrates how a pulpit can be misused to sow discord, turning a place of worship into a platform for prejudice. Reverend Jesse Jackson. Reverend Jesse Jackson stands as one of the most recognized civil rights leaders of the 20th century. Born in 1941 in Greenville, South Carolina, Jackson rose to prominence under the mentorship of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and later founded Operation Push People United to Save Humanity and the Rainbow Coalition. His work in the 1970s and 1980s made him a powerful political and religious figure advocating for racial equality, economic justice, and voting rights. Twice, he ran for the Democratic presidential nomination in 1984 and 1988, leaving a lasting mark on American politics. But Jackson's carefully built reputation as a moral leader suffered a devastating blow in 2001. At the time, he was counseling President Bill Clinton during the Monica Lewinsky scandal, urging honesty, discipline, and family responsibility. Yet the press uncovered that Jackson himself had been living a double life. For years, he maintained an affair with a colleague, Karen Stanford, who eventually gave birth to his daughter in 1999. Even more damaging was the revelation that Jackson used funds from his nonprofit to support Stanford and the child, raising ethical questions about misusing organizational resources. The news broke in January 2001, shaking both the religious and political worlds. Jackson publicly admitted the affair, apologized to his family and supporters, and stepped back briefly from public life. But the contradiction between his message of integrity and his personal choices left many disillusioned. Jackson never fully regained the moral authority he once held. Though he continued activism and mentoring, the scandal remains a permanent part of his legacy. It serves as a reminder that even icons of justice can falter when personal desires collide with public duty. Carlton Pearson. Bishop Carlton Pearson was once considered a rising star in Pentecostal Christianity. Born in 1953 in Oklahoma, he was mentored by Oral Roberts and became one of the most popular preachers in the movement. At his peak in the 1990s, Pearson's church in Tulsa attracted over 5,000 members each week, and his television ministry reached audiences nationwide. He was celebrated for his powerful preaching, dynamic music ministry, and leadership in conferences that drew tens of thousands. Then came his theological bombshell. Troubled by the traditional doctrine of eternal damnation, Pearson began preaching what he called the gospel of inclusion. He rejected the existence of hell, teaching that Jesus' sacrifice had already saved all humanity, Christians and non-Christians alike. To Pearson, a loving God could not condemn billions to eternal torment simply for being born into the wrong culture or religion. The backlash was swift and severe. In 2004, the Joint College of African American Pentecostal Bishops formally declared him a heretic. Once packed pews emptied as congregants abandoned him. His television ministry collapsed and fellow pastors cut ties, fearful of being associated with his radical views. From being a celebrated heir to Pentecostal leadership, he became a pariah almost overnight. Despite the rejection, Pearson remained committed to his message of unconditional love and universal salvation. In later years, he found a home among more progressive Christian circles and even became the subject of the 2018 Netflix film Come Sunday, which dramatized his rise and fall. Carlton Pearson's journey reflects the high cost of challenging orthodoxy. To some, he is a prophet of love who bravely confronted outdated theology. To others, he remains a cautionary tale of a pastor who traded truth for personal belief, sacrificing his legacy in the process. The stories of these pastors remind us that power in the pulpit comes with heavy responsibility. Some used faith to inspire, while others let ego, money, or reckless choices destroy trust. Their scandals continue to raise uncomfortable questions about leadership accountability and what it truly means to serve God. Were these men victims of human weakness, or did they deliberately exploit their positions for personal gain? That's the tension that keeps their names alive in controversy. So tell me, which one of these pastors do you believe caused the greatest damage to their legacy?